this time, I'd like to call the July 9th, 2024 Fuquay-Varina Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Quasi-judicial hearings are a time for petitioners to present justification for special use permits or variance requests and for the members of the public to testify in support or in opposition to these presented justifications. Quasi-judicial hearings are unlike legislative hearings in that witness testimony is limited to the field of expertise or to a party with standing and not general public comments in support or opposition. Any evidence presented tonight before the board will become the property of the town. Anyone wishing to address the board tonight will need to sign the public hearing sign-in sheet, complete an oath form at the podium, and be required to take an oath or affirmation issued by the deputy clerk. All right, so we'll proceed with swearing in of witnesses. At this time, I'd like to request all those who are wanting to give testimony at tonight's public hearing portion of the meeting, please come forward in order to be sworn in by the deputy clerk. Looks like we got a good crowd, so if everyone coming forward would please line up between the podium and the board members, and please face towards the public seating area. Thank you.
If everyone will please raise their right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly swear to tell the whole truth. And nothing but the truth, so help me God. For evidence presented before the Board of Adjustment of the town of Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina. Thank you. You may have a seat.
All right, just to double check, has everyone that is going to be sworn in tonight completed and signed the oath form and given it to the deputy clerk? Yes, very good. All right. Item number 2A, approval of the minutes from the January 8th, 2024 meeting. Purpose of this agenda item is to consider approval of the minutes from the Board of Adjustment meeting on January 8th this year. Has the board had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone have any changes or corrections to recommend?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the January 8, 2024 minutes as presented?
Yes, I'll move to approve them.
I'll second.
All right. All opposition, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. And I didn't look here.
You should have said all in favor.
All in favor?
There you go.
All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Okay.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And the minutes are approved or approved as amended unanimously. All right, moving on to item 3A. Going to skip this, Pam, or do you want to move forward? Okay. Purpose of this agenda item is to nominate and elect a Board of Adjustment member to serve as vice chair.
I can read the little snippet here.
Please.
In January of each year, the Board of Adjustment shall elect a vice chair from its membership who shall serve through December of that year. This item was tabled from the January meeting due to lack of a chair for the Board of Adjustment. The duties and responsibilities of the vice chair are as follows. 1, during the absence, disability, or disqualification of the chair, the vice chair shall exercise or perform all the duties and be subject to all the responsibilities of the chair. And 2, serve as chair of special committees appointed by the chair. At this time, the chair will accept nominations for vice chair and the membership of the Board of Adjustment, followed by a motion to appoint any regular member as vice chair of the Board of Adjustment for the calendar year 2024.
Thank you, Pam. Would anyone like to make a motion to nominate a vice chair tonight?
I would like to make a motion to nominate William as vice chair.
Do I have a second? All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And so we have a new vice chair, I think. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The vote passed in unanimous fashion. That brings us to item 4A on the agenda, which is our first hearing of the night, special use permit petition 8316 and 8320 Lake Wheeler Road, Christchurch, North Carolina. Property identification number 06895871142 and 0689681119. Board of Adjustment Special Use Permit Case 2024-01. And the purpose of this agenda item is to consider a special use permit at the stated addresses by the petitioner, the Christchurch, North Carolina. And at this time, further information will be provided by town staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, I'd like to support the staff, or submit the staff report and all the supporting documentation into the official records of the town. Subject properties are located at 8316 and 8320 Lake Wheeler Road. The cumulative acreage of the two lots is 7.22 acres within the town's corporate limits. The principal proposed use for the subject property will be a place of worship. The zoning of the subject properties is residential low density, or RLD CZD, with the following conditions applicable to the property as a result of case REZ 2018-12. Condition 1 is place of worship. The rezoned property will be restricted to a place of worship and its ancillary uses. Number 2 is driveway. The church driveway shall have a minimum driveway width of 24 feet and a maximum of 36 feet. The driveway should not be located less than 10 feet from the radius of the nearest street intersection. Condition number 3 is lighting. Outdoor lighting will be at a minimum intensity to reduce the impact on neighbors, while also provided to discourage vandalism and theft. Outdoor lighting fixtures will be no more than 30 feet in height with automatic cutoffs. Condition number 4 is perimeter buffers. All perimeter buffers will meet the opaque type A requirement. The subject properties are surrounded by residential subdivisions, the Legacy Farm subdivision to the north, and the Ridgebrook Bluffs subdivision to the west, and the Westbury subdivision to the south across Lake Wheeler Road. The special use permit request, the petitioner is requesting a special use permit to allow the development of a place of worship within a residential zoning district as required by section 9-1255.C.6.A.V of the Land Development Ordinance. The attached site plan demonstrates general compliance with the town standards, but specific development requirements, including right-of-way improvements, buffers, parking, facades, and landscaping, will be confirmed during the actual site plan review process. This property has not been subject to previous cases as seen by the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, at this time, do any board members have any questions for the town? Okay, if not, will the representative for the petitioner for Christchurch please come forward and make your presentation? When you come forward, please state your name, your profession, and your address for the board, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Michael Kent. I'm an attorney with Envisage Law, E-N-V-I-S-A-G-E. My accent often, people mishear that. Envisage Law. We're located at 2601 Oberlin Road, Suite 100 in Raleigh. Zip code is 27608. Our law firm represents Christchurch, North Carolina, who is the petitioner and property owner in this case, and we'd like to start by thanking you for your time and consideration this evening. Christchurch is excited about its proposal, and it looks forward to being a part of the community here in Fuquay-Varina. According to the permitted use table, which is found in section 9-1254 of the Land Development Ordinance, a place of worship, as you've heard, is allowed in the RLD district with the issuance of a special use permit, and pursuant to section 9-1753 of the LDO, this board grants special uses if 4 findings are established. I'd like to spend a few minutes addressing each of those 4 findings per the application that has been submitted, and then we'll call upon 3 additional experts who will testify in support of the application as well. First, you'll hear from Mr. Pete Bogle, who is a North Carolina licensed architect and a principal with the Bogle Firm Architecture in Salisbury. Then Mr. Chuck Hill, a professional engineer and project manager with Thomas and Hutton in Durham. Mr. Hill will talk primarily about the contributing factors in the application. And then finally, Mr. Dan Jewell, a professional landscape architect and principal in charge with Thomas and Hutton, also in Durham. We have representatives from the church here. I do not think they've been sworn in, but if y'all have questions that are best answered by them, we can refer to them as well. With that said, I'll jump right into the findings. The first finding that we need to establish is that the proposed use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted. We submit the proposed use will not only not endanger the public health or safety, but actually will enhance and provide some benefit to neighboring properties and the community at large. Mr. Bogle will address that issue a little bit more later on, but places of worship often have or bring benefits to the areas in which they are located. The use will not create any special hazards, nuisances, or hardships, and as the application indicates, actions will be taken to mitigate any potential issues. So just to run through some of the highlights. With regard to traffic, we think that our evidence shows that the peak traffic increases will occur primarily on Sunday mornings, which is an otherwise low traffic time. We think the increases will be modest, but the site plan shows that we will make road improvements to accommodate even those increases. Mr. Hill will talk a little bit more about some of the improvements when he addresses the contributing factors. The site will have adequate parking to accommodate peak attendance for Sunday mornings. With regard to noise, any construction efforts, as well as once built, any services or events held at the property will adhere to the town's noise ordinance, and measures will be taken to mitigate or minimize noise as stated in the application. Specifically, the placement of the buildings and play areas are such as to minimize noise traveling to adjacent parcels. And there will also be some design and construction features that will help reduce any sounds that are generated internally in the buildings. Finally, there'll be landscape buffers to screen the site from the public right-of-way and neighboring parcels. With regard to finding number 2, the proposed use meets all required conditions and specifications. Our proposal satisfies the requirements of both the land development ordinance, which imposes 3 conditions on places of worship in a residential zone, as well as 3 additional conditions, as you heard, that were imposed on the property specifically when it was rezoned in 2018. So from the LDO, section 9-1255C6A, church in a residential zone needs to have a minimum lot size of 3 acres. Ours will be 7.2, so we exceed that minimum. The LDO also requires a minimum 50-foot setback from property lines and public rights-of-way. We will be maintaining a 70-foot minimum setback, so again, we exceed that condition. And then internally illuminated signs are prohibited adjacent to any residential use. We do not propose having any of those near residential use, so we will comply with that as well. As the staff suggested a few moments ago, there were some conditions as a result of case number REZ-2018-12 that were imposed. That's the map amendment that gave the current zoning to this parcel. The use is restricted according to that, the ordinance doing the rezoning restricted to a place of worship and ancillary uses. That's exactly what we want to do, so we will conform to the use restriction. There's a restriction, as you've heard, about width and location of the driveway. Our plan complies with that restriction. And then the 2 restrictions on outdoor lighting that essentially they have minimum intensity, sufficient enough to prevent bad things from happening, but the very minimum to help alleviate any effects of the surrounding parcels. Our plan calls for adherence to that, as well as fixtures that are no more than 30 feet in height with automatic cutoffs. And again, our plan complies with that as well. That brings us to the third finding. The proposed use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property or the use as a public necessity. We think and submit that this finding is also satisfied. The proposed use will be low intensity, aesthetically pleasing, and consistent with the surrounding residential neighborhoods. As we've alluded to already, you'll hear more about in a moment, churches often serve as community centers and provide benefits to their surrounding area. And then, as we've noted, and as the application suggests in more detail, we will have mitigation to alleviate any impacts or effects. And then finally, the fourth finding, the location and character of the proposed use, if developed according to the plans submitted, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the town of Fuquay-Varina and its ordinances. The use is harmonious for the reasons already mentioned and stated in the application. It will be in harmony with the adjacent residential neighborhoods. And in the larger area, there are a number of churches already in place. There is some office and institutional use not too far away, some commercial use. We think this will be compatible with the general tenor of that area. And as for conformity, the town's 2040 Community Vision Land Use Plan recognizes that places of worship may be appropriate uses in certain residential areas. We think this is one, and therefore it is in general conformity with that recognition. And as we've discussed, the proposed use will conform to the requirements of the LDO, the rezoning ordinance for the parcel, and all other lawful regulations. So with that, I am happy to take any questions you may have of me. But otherwise, I would like to call Mr. Bogle to talk to you a little bit more about the plan and how it satisfies each of these findings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, Chair and Board. My name is Pete Bogle. I'm an architect practicing out of Salisbury, North Carolina. Our office is at 110 North Main, Salisbury. I've just established a little bit of credibility as an expert witness. I've been practicing architecture since 1997. I've had my own firm since 2015. We're a staff of 5. We specialize in not specializing, which is why we stay as busy as we do. But among that, we do a lot of work with churches, which of course always comes with a lot of rezoning, presentation to planning board. A little bit different track that I've taken in my professional career is 2013, I was the director of building code enforcement for Rowan County. So I've gotten to see the other side of the construction industry as well. And I've served 2 full terms on the Rowan County Planning Board, most of that time as chair. So I understand some of where you're coming from. So as Mike mentioned, I'm going to be going through some of these same 4 findings. I'll put a different flavor on them for you, though. So finding 1, the proposed use will not materially endanger public health or safety of where it's located. Places of worship, the use, places of worship, do not materially endanger the public health or safety when located in residential zoning districts, but instead, they add to the sense of community by being a place for local residents to meet each other, to interact, to get to know each other. And in this way, places of worship serve as an essential element in creating a community identity and a sense of place by bringing people together to interact and create positive memories. In your section 9-1004 purpose in your LDO, section E, providing a sense of place, encourages places of worship as one of the important elements to, quote, create a sense of place that identifies the citizen and government partnership for the town of Fuquay-Varina. Places of worship also provide safe places for people with physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. They provide volunteer services that aid and support their neighbors. They provide play, fun opportunities for children through summer camps, after-school activities. In a public function, places of worship are often used as polling locations. Architecturally, places of worship are designed as aesthetically pleasing, long-lasting monuments, which from a community standpoint provides stability to a community. Site layout will be engineered to provide all the LDO required environmental protections, including stormwater, public utilities, and I'll let the civil engineers speak more on that. But of special note on this specific site, the site includes an existing pond that will become a major development feature for the planned church. During our neighborhood meeting, we had a few neighbors who actually came who have property that back up onto that pond. And that was the only concern that was expressed by anybody who showed up that day, was to make sure that pond remains in place. So the pond is actually going to be a development feature for the church. Pond is also a natural habitat to many species of wildlife in the area, which was another one of the neighbors' concerns. So Christ Church, to sum up finding one, Christ Church will not materially endanger the public health or safety in the proposed location, but instead will be a catalyst of growth and improvement for the local public health and safety. Finding 2 is a much shorter one. The proposed use meets all required conditions and specifications. Architecturally, the building facades will use the materials that are approvable in the LDO. Most of these consist of masonry, glass, pitched shingle roofs, and will utilize traditional design elements with the intent of becoming a long-lasting, timeless edifice for both the church and the community. Christ Church will submit finalized facade designs for review by the town as required by the LDO. Finding 3, the proposed use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining properties or the use is a public, or if the use is a public necessity, will not injure the value of adjoining properties. So places of worship are very commonly allowed and encouraged in residential zoning districts. Some of the districts or some of the jurisdictions that I've worked with across the state, these can come with special requirements, special use permits as here, conditional districts. We've seen several different ways that communities approach places of worship in a residential district. The key is where they're located within the residential district, and then how the church refers or relates to its neighbors. Common among those requirements are scale of the buildings, visual buffering from parking lots, traffic concerns, noise concerns. When those are regulated, places of worship are commonly encouraged and then allowed because they do not negatively affect values of adjoining properties. Places of worship are commonly considered community amenities, which add value to a residential neighborhood. Instead of detracting, they add. Specific to this project, Christ Church will improve and maintain the existing pond, which was a specific desire of some of the adjacent property owners. Christ Church will also meet all the special use requirements of the LDO for regulations for places of worship, including scale, setback, landscape buffering, and traffic improvements. And the last one, finding 4, the location of character of a proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted, will be in harmony with the area of which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the town of Fuquay-Varina. So 2 things, location and character. Location, Fuquay-Varina's 2040 Community Vision Plan and zoning regulations allow for places of worship in residential area, recognizing their importance as community anchors and their compatibility with surrounding houses. Places of worship serve the communities in which they are located. So it's important for these places of worship to be within the community. The property, this specific property, fronts Lake Wheeler Road and provides a transition buffer between the higher traffic volume of Lake Wheeler Road and the adjacent residential neighborhood. This is the area that you want, this is the type of properties that you want churches to be located in residential areas. You don't want them on the end of a cul-de-sac. You want them to be a buffer zone between the heavier traffic area and the quieter neighborhoods. Then Lake Wheeler Road, with appropriate improvements, has the capacity to serve the traffic needs for Christ Church. Those are location. Character, architectural design. The church will feature a traditional architectural style that harmonizes with the surrounding residential and community buildings. Key design elements will include gable roofs, masonry facades, architectural precast, and large windows. We have submitted in Appendix B some of the preliminary elevations, so you can sense a flavor of what Christ Church is after there. Scale and massing. The church will be principally a 2-story structure centered within the property. As was already mentioned, we're 70 feet setback from the nearest property line, exceeding the required minimum of 50. Landscaping. The site will preserve existing trees where possible. Required landscaping buffers will also be provided between the church and the adjacent properties to meet all the LDO standards. Additional decorative landscaping will be installed around the church and grounds, as is common to churches. The existing pond, again, will be improved with the intent of being a focal point from the planned Fellowship Hall terrace. And traditional architectural detailing, well-maintained landscaping, lawns, and the retention of an improvement of the existing pond will all contribute positively toward being in harmony with the existing character of the area. So in summary, Christ Church seeks to be a good neighbor within the area. This is vital to their mission since they seek to serve the community in which they're located. And I'll take any questions or turn it over to the next one.
Does anybody have any questions for the witness?
I have a little concern about the pond.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the dam located?
The dam is at the road.
Lake Wheeler Road?
It is at Lake Wheeler Road, yes.
And you have full access all around the dam area?
Currently, yes.
Okay. And it's fed, and of the Davises?
Yeah, the pond is fed from the northwest.
Any further questions?
I'll call the next one.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Hill. I'm a professional engineer in North Carolina. I work for Thomas & Hutton in Durham. We're at 2510 Meridian Parkway, 27713. I've been in this business for over 35 years, managing, building, and designing projects. I would suggest there's a few hundred projects. I hate to have to count them all, really, but site development is what we do, and well, one of the things we do. We do several things, but that's one of the things I do. I've had many projects similar to this Christ Church project. They contain site layout, grading, paving, drainage, stormwater treatment, and also designing, permitting, and the construction phase work for all these projects. And another aspect that's very similar is we do a lot of coordination with the agencies, which we've already started with the town of Fuquay. So we look forward to moving forward with the site plan process. And so I'm here tonight to talk about some of the contributing factors. So I don't have to go through the findings 1, 2, 3, 4. But contributing factors, and we listed some of these in the application. Circulation. The proposed project will facilitate traffic flow and minimize congestion during services and events with a combination of required improvements compliant with the town of Fuquay-Varina LDO, the town of Fuquay-Varina Transportation Plan, and the North Carolina Department of Transportation Roadway Design Manual. For the technical memorandum for traffic by Davenport, and this was dated September 22, 2023, we are proposing a new eastbound left turn lane with a minimum 100 foot of storage and appropriate deceleration and taper lane. These improvements will be consistent with NCDOT requirements. Also, per the technical memorandum dated September 22, 2023, we're proposing a new westbound right turn lane with a minimum of 100 foot of storage and the appropriate deceleration and taper lane. These will also be consistent with NCDOT. And the proposed access to the project is on Lake Wheeler Road, approximately 600 feet from Trilogy Farm Drive, and this driveway will be installed or constructed as consistent with DOT requirements as well. Parking and loading location areas. The proposed on-site parking will exceed the town's minimum requirements. We want to make sure we have enough parking for all these new users of the church. And ADA compliant parking and building access will be provided as part of this project. Service entrance and areas. The drives and parking areas will be configured to provide adequate access to service areas and the on-site dumpster enclosure. The on-site dumpster enclosure will be screened per the town requirements. Lighting, I think I heard this earlier tonight. Lighting will be provided per the town requirements, and exterior lighting will be designed to minimize the light intrusion onto adjacent properties. We don't want to bother the neighbors. Utilities, the proposed project will utilize public water and public sewer. Environmental protection. Environmental protection is addressed by the preservation of natural features as possible with the avoidance of demolition and/or the protection of existing routes during construction, constructing a wet pond for stormwater treatment, and the installation of a landscaped median along the new access drive. For stormwater treatment, the specific rainfall events per town requirements will be treated to avoid additional stormwater peak flows. The stormwater will also be treated per town requirements to minimize the discharge of total suspended solids as required as well. This is very common. We do this every day. Effect on adjacent property. Proposed improvements are not expected to have negative impacts on adjacent properties. Roadway improvements will effectively manage the traffic flow to the new church. The lighting design will minimize light intrusion onto adjacent properties, and the church is not expected to generate significant noise and will comply with the local noise ordinance. And that covers the contributing factors that I was going to review. Are there any questions for this?
Yeah, I do have a question. Can you see the plan that's up on the screen?
Yes.
Are the trees that are indicated there in a golden color, are those trees to be saved, or what are the significance of those trees?
Yes, those are trees that we propose to save.
Okay. Is that area wooded now, or is it, what's the existing state of that? I'm just curious. Seems kind of random just to have 3 trees.
I don't remember if we had any trees being removed. It went away.
Okay.
We're losing 1 tree to the right of the new entrance because we have to get through, and saving the other 2 large trees. The ones in the back, I think we're pretty alone.
Perhaps they meet maybe a champion tree requirement or something that I'm not familiar with, but thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hill?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Jewell can come and speak to landscaping and screening.
Thank you, Chuck. Good evening, Chair, fellow board members. My name is Dan Jewell. I'm the principal in charge of the Durham office of Thomas & Hutton. We're a civil engineering, landscape architecture, and surveying firm, again, located at 2510 Meridian Parkway in Durham. I'm here tonight speaking from my expertise as a North Carolina licensed landscape architect. Received a degree from Purdue University in landscape architecture in 1981, and have been practicing in North Carolina since 1985, primarily in the Triangle area, and primarily doing site plans. I've literally worked on hundreds of site plans over those years. Many have been places of worship just like this. I'm going to be brief this evening. I would like to speak for a moment about the site requirements, and that has to do with open space and landscaping, just to reiterate a few of those points as an expert. I've reviewed the preliminary site design that's been prepared by our office for this proposal, as well as the Fuquay-Varina Land Development Ordinance. I can attest that landscape plantings and buffers for perimeters, parking lots, and specific requirements for places of worship adjacent to residential lots will be provided per the ordinance. And Mr. Miller, to your point, if you visit the site, you're welcome to do so. It was a farm at one point. This was the farmhouse and the buildings close by. So what we have are some mature trees with lots of grass and lawn and open space around them. So saving those trees is going to be extremely important, and they have been growing up for many years by themselves, so they're very beautiful trees. With that, I'd like to conclude my testimony and happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Jewell?
All right. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to Mr. Kent to wrap things up. So thank you.
I will be brief. We think that the application and the other evidence you've heard this evening establishes satisfactorily each of the 4 findings, and we respectfully request that the board approve the application for a special use permit as submitted. If the board has any other questions, we're happy to answer them, but otherwise, I thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Does the board have any questions for any of the witnesses at this point that we'd like to? Okay, at this point, I'm going to close the public. Oh, yes. Is there anybody that'd like to speak in opposition to this special use permit? All right, thank you. At this point, I would like to close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Attorney. And we're going to go into discussion with the board. So does the board have any discussion on this matter? No? Nothing? Good presentation. All right, so if no discussion items, we'll go into findings of fact. Would anybody like to make a motion on finding of fact number 1?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'll move, the proposed place of worship will not materially endanger public health or safety if located and developed according to the submitted plan, because the plan calls for adequate expansion to Lake Wheeler Road, substantial parking and noise control measures, as well as substantial visual screening.
A second.
Second? Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 All in opposition? Motion of finding fact number 1 is approved unanimously. Finding of fact number 2, the proposed use meets or does not meet all required conditions and specifications. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve finding 2. The proposed use meets required conditions and specifications. Not only does it meet, it also exceeds. And so that's a good solid reason why I propose to.
I'd like to second that motion. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Any? Motion for findings of fact number 2 is approved, unanimous. Findings of fact number 3, the proposed use will or will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property or the use is a public necessity. Do I have a motion for number 3, finding of fact number 3?
I'll make a motion. make a motion for finding of fact number 3. The proposed use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property or the use is a public necessity. I think that they brought up a good point where they did ask the neighboring parcels, and their only concern was that pond, and they plan on keeping that pond as well.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Good. Finding of fact number 3 is approved. Finding of fact number 4, the location and character of the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted, will or will not be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the town of Fuquay-Varina and its ordinances, because. Do we have a motion for finding of fact number 4?
All right, I'll make a motion. I'll move the location and character of the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with a plan of development of the town of Fuquay-Varina and its ordinances, because of the compatibility with surrounding uses, with other churches in the neighborhood, because of the positive community aspect of having a church on the location. Period.
Second.
Second. Very good. All in favor of finding of fact number 4 motion, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Finding of fact number 4 is approved. The petitioner has been advised that the burden of proof and evidence upon submitting such application is the responsibility of the petitioner. Such proof and evidence presented must demonstrate that the required findings of fact have been met. At this time, do I have a motion for the petition?
I move that we approve the petition.
Second.
Okay, the motion to approve Board of Adjustment Special Use Permit 2024-01. Do I have a, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Motion for Board of Adjustment Special Use Permit 2024-01 passes unanimously. Thank you for your time tonight. That was a great presentation. All right, moving on to item 4B, special use permit petition for 5417 Spence Farm Road, Vertical Life Church, on property identified by PIN number 0657152630, and this is Board of Adjustment Special Use Permit 2024-02 is the case number. Purpose of this agenda item is to consider special use permit BOA SUP 2024-02 at 5417 Spence Farm Road by petitioner Vertical Life Church. At this time, we'll allow staff to provide further information.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I would also like to submit this staff report and all the supporting documentation into the official record of the town. The subject property is located at 5417 Spence Farm Road on 6.87 acres within the town corporate limits. The principal use proposed for the subject property will be a place of worship. The zoning of the subject property is residential agriculture, or RA, and the surrounding property, or the subject property is surrounded on all sides by single-family residential and agricultural lots, also zoned residential agricultural, or RA. The petitioner is requesting a special use permit to permit the operation of a place of worship within a residential zoning district as required by Section 9-1255 C6AV of the Land Development Ordinance. The attached site plan demonstrates general compliance with the town standards, but specific development requirements, including right-of-way improvements, buffers, parking, facades, and landscaping, will be confirmed during the site plan review process with the town. This property has not been subject to previous cases seen by the Board of Adjustment.
If I can just make a correction, it is not within town jurisdiction, it's in the ETJ. That was a mistake in the staff report.
Okay. Board notes, thank you. Any questions for the town at this time? Okay, if not, will the petitioner for Vertical Life Church please come forward and make your presentation? And when you come forward, please state your name, your profession, and your address for the board, please.
Good evening. My name is Nathaniel Parker. I'm an attorney. McHouston Law Offices at 200 Town Village Drive in Cary, North Carolina, 27513. Just want to give you a heads up. I'm going to do my presentation a little bit differently than the prior one because they're back to back and look very similar. I want to say that so you don't wonder. I'm not going to go ahead and read our application to you. Instead, I'm going to have the witnesses go ahead and testify so you have the actual evidence. I'll do a summary afterwards if there's any questions with that, just so you know what I'm doing with that. First of all, I want to go ahead and provide introductions.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can you speak towards the microphone a little bit more?
My apologies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's try that. Is that working better?
Yes.
Fabulous. Good. Thank you for asking. I'll provide my introductions, first of all. The first witness you'll hear from is going to be Pastor Nathaniel Brubaker. Then we will have our engineer, Jamie Guerrero, and then finally we'll go ahead and hear from Joel Tate, who is an appraiser. So they'll come up and they're going to speak to the findings of fact. With our engineer, I'll go ahead and take you through those findings of fact so you can track along exactly with what evidence we're going to provide for the findings that you need. So unless there are any questions for me, I'll go ahead and I'll bring up Pastor Brubaker if that's all right with you. Wonderful.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to hear our case and for your consideration this evening. Thank you to Pam and her team. You've been really helpful, especially with the speed at which you helped us get this done, so thank you for that. So I represent Vertical Life Church. I'm one of the staff pastors there. We're a small church, currently meeting in Holly Grove Middle School. We launched in 2015. 5 families from around the United States moved here to start a church together. And since then, we've grown to several hundred families, mostly residing. If you took a heat map of our church membership, you would find that most of them reside in Fuquay-Varina and southern Holly Springs. And so this parcel at 5417 Spence Farm Road is just dead in the center of where most of our congregants live. So our congregants, we're just part of the community. You know, a lot of them own small businesses, work local jobs, coach their kids' sports teams. They're involved. Our largest demographic within the church are young families. And the joke I kind of make is that if you don't have 3 kids, you're behind here. And so we have young families with a lot of children. And so, you know, one of our beliefs here at our church is that healthy families make healthy communities. And so since our launch, we've aimed in purpose to create healthy families. And so some of the ways that we do that are through parenting and marriage classes, parenting and marriage conferences, camps for children, groups for those struggling with addiction in order to help them get healthy, and then just overall trying to facilitate atmospheres and opportunities where healthy relationships can happen between families and they can grow together. Since launching, we've been a portable church, which means we rent a facility, and we haven't been lucky enough to rent a facility that we could leave all of our stuff at throughout the week. So that means that we set up and tear down every single week. And so if this were to be approved, our set up and tear down team would be extremely grateful. But we've mainly met at Holly Grove Middle School, which is on Avon Ferry Road in Holly Springs. We're looking to make a continued impact in the local community, and we believe that a church facility will help us to do that. In addition to accomplishing our purpose as a church family, we recognize and are open to exploring potential community uses like a polling place, like a shelter in times of extreme weather, or food distribution center, and just other opportunities we can utilize for this property to serve the community. When I say any of those things, I don't mean that as a primary use, but an ancillary use of the church building for a small and specific time period. We're currently holding one service on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. at Holly Grove Middle School. Our current average attendance is right around 360 to 375 people, or adults, and about 150 children. Our services typically last an hour and a half. Yeah, so that's my testimony. Are there any questions I could answer for you about our church?
You just had your name and address for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I need to start over?
Nope.
You want me to go through it
There
all
you
again?
go.
I'm Nathaniel Brubaker. My home address, or my work address, Pam. 306 Saunders Street, Apex, North Carolina, 27502. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions before he leaves? Anything? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll call Jamie Guerrero.
Mr. Guerrero, please state your name, address, and profession.
Yes, sir. And my name's Jamie Guerrero. I'm at 314 East Main Street in Clayton, North Carolina, 27520. I'm with a firm called Adams & Hodge Engineering. We are a professional civil site engineering firm. I'm here tonight to speak on some specific issues with our specific site plan. I could almost say ditto from the last case that you just heard. It's a very similar, obviously very similar case. So I'm going to try to save some time and not get into the as specific details like they did, but I will address some highlights of this application. Obviously, it's the proposed use is a religious assembly. It's a church. We're going to meet all the criteria, site criteria from the town of Fuquay. As far as landscape buffers, we'll go into one exception. Stormwater regulations and parking, we're going to actually exceed the minimal parking requirements considerably. The town of Fuquay requires one space per 5 members or congregants of the church. The church felt that was a little bit too not enough parking for their Sunday service activity, so we increased that to basically one space per 3 members or congregants of the church. So I'll address the highlights of it based on similar cases I've been with in the past. There's some common issues that, and based on the neighborhood meeting, we had some common concerns. Traffic being probably the biggest one. So based on the ITRE standards, it's based on the maximum size of the proposed building size. We're showing 36,000 square foot building. It's not going to be that 36,000. That's our building footprint. It's going to be less, but let's just assume we're going with the maximum build out of 36,000. Based on the type of use for churches, the standard is for weekday traffic, it's about 328 trips that will be generating. What I mean by trips is considered going into the church parking lot and going out of the church parking lot. So each way is considered a trip. But with churches, it's kind of unusual. It's not a normal commercial business. As you know, their primary service is at Sunday at 10 o'clock. So based on their current member of 300 or close to 400 members a day, you're talking about a little bit more than 133 trips on that Sunday morning at around 30 minutes before 10 and 30 minutes after 11:30 after their worship service. So but being that it's on Sunday, that is not considered peak hour. And generally, when you're doing a traffic analysis, you're primarily concerned about peak hour traffic. What that means, most of you guys probably mean, that some in the audience may not. So peak hour usually occurs on the week, or it does occur on the weekday, and it's somewhere, there's an AM and there's a PM. There's 2 peak hours a day, and it's generally between 7 and 9 in the morning, if it's in the AM, or between 4 and 6 in the evening. Somewhere in there is your peak hour range. So for the specific church at this maximum size, the peak hour traffic would be 28 vehicles. So it's very minimal impact as far as traffic during the peak hour times. So again, primarily traffic will be on Sunday morning, 30 minutes before service and 30 minutes after service. We are proposing, and the town requires a dedicated right turn lane with adequate storage and deceleration and taper. We are proposing that in our plans. We're proposing the 50-foot minimum setback from the property line for our building footprint, and we got type A buffers on 3 sides, and the type C, 15-foot type C buffer on the north side against Spence Farm Road. That being said, we have a long driveway where we're not showing any parking because we're putting our stormwater management on that side. So you won't get any stacking issues, internal stacking issues, as churches concludes at the end of the Sunday service. We are proposing 30-foot minimum buffers on all sides except for the side to the west. And that is, I believe it's called Three Pond Drive. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a private road. I'm not sure if it's been maintained. It's essentially a dirt path that goes back and serves some single-family residential behind this location for the church. We're proposing, and we'll work with planning staff during the site plan approval process, if we could go down to a 20-foot against that road. There is a 50-foot easement, access easement. The road was supposed to be within that 50-foot corridor, but as we got our survey information back, we realized the road did meander into our property. So we're going to straighten that road or move that road, shift that road so outside of our property limits. And we are planning to request a reduced buffer from 30 to 20 foot with some higher density of plantings, evergreen planting, so you have that screening year round. Again, that will be during the site plan approval process. Second concern is stormwater. It's very, obviously we're generating a lot more impervious surface area. Right now there's nothing out there. It is essentially overgrown field with early successional forest growing in the back, a lot of pine trees and some very small hardwoods. We are increasing the impervious surface to 48%, so we have to design a stormwater measure to control for 2 reasons: water quality and water quantity. Quantity is the amount of water that leaves the site. Most municipalities, including the town of Fuquay, require that the post-construction flow is not any higher than what the pre-construction flow. So we usually build a stormwater control measure. That's what the SCM stands for. In this case, it's likely going to be a wet pond, but it could also be a constructed wetland. That wet pond will retain the additional runoff water that is generated and release it at a slow rate over a long period of time, essentially 2 to 5 days. It discharges. So it doesn't increase any downstream peak flows. Then it will not increase it any more than what's out there today. Some concerns about the pond safety. Wet ponds have to be designed in accordance to the North Carolina Division of Environmental and Natural Resources Design Manual. They require a 10-foot vegetative buffer, 5 feet that is under the below the normal pool level, and 5 feet of that buffer width is above the normal pool level, and it drops 6 inches in each direction. What that does is it provides an area for the plantings. It requires extensive plantings for an area of planting, but it also provides for safety. So in case you have somebody that walks into the pond or wades into the pond, they're not going to be dropping off a shelf and going underwater for the first 5 feet. And then it's a 3-to-1 slope down to the deepest part of that pond is generally between 4 to 5 feet deep in most cases. Stormwater quality, we have to, when you increase impervious area, you get some more what's total suspended solids and nitrogen. The pond treats for that. Like I said, the pond is vegetated. It has a vegetative buffer, it has trees around it, and that absorbs the nutrients, and the pond itself allows for any suspended solids to settle out at the bottom of the pond in between rain events. So we will be meeting that requirement as specified. I'm trying to think of any lighting, same as the last. We're going to have downcast lighting fixtures that minimize any kind of light exfiltration into other surrounding properties, and it's there for, of course, for safety purposes. Noise, we're proposing, church services will be held indoors. There will be, or likely to be, an outdoor area for children to play. That will primarily be during and after services and during Sunday school and any camps that they have. But most activities will be indoors, and of course we'll have a lot of the screening out there with the vegetation. Let's see. This site is located in the ETJ, so therefore water and sewer are not available. So we have already had a soil scientist go out there and designate areas that are suitable soils for septic. This will be a septic system, and it will be a private well for a water source. And that has to be permitted through Wake County and meet all the criteria of the state and the environmental health criteria of Wake County. I think that is all the specific issues.
Jamie, if you would tell the board how this proposed use will meet all the required conditions and specifications, that'd be useful.
So the proposed religious assembly, if developed according to the submitted plan, of course, it'll be in harmony with the existing surrounding residential subdivision. The last petitioner went into great detail about how that harmonious.
And I think that that's
detail.
good. Let's address specifically the conditions of 9.1225. That is that the site is more than 3 acres.
Exactly.
And also that there'll be a minimum of 50-foot setbacks, and
Yep.
there'll be no internally illuminated signage. So if you can testify
That's
to those
correct.
points, I think they.
Yep, that is correct. The site acreage is 6.87 acres. And I already described the minimum setback for the principal building is 50 feet, and our site plan confirms with that 50 feet setback. And I believe that meets the standard 9-1225C-6.
I do have a question. What is the adjacent zoning? I may have missed that. Is it residential?
It is residential.
Agricultural?
Residential agriculture, yes, sir.
And what's the minimum landscape buffer width?
So it's 30 feet on all the property sides except for the road frontage itself. It's a 15-foot minimum landscape buffer.
And for the staff, would the reduction in the buffer at the rear of the building be a variance later?
So no, there's actually an allowance now in the LDO for administrative adjustments. So if they prove an equal or higher level buffer, like they had mentioned, additional evergreens, fencing, things like that, that would be something that would be submitted and approved with the site plan.
Does the board have any further questions for Mr. Guerrero at this time?
I do.
Yes.
I'm just looking at the site map right now, and you said that there might be an area for children to go out and play. Where's that?
So the building footprint, you see the building footprint is approximately 36,000 square feet. The
Right.
actual building they're going to construct is not going to take up the entire footprint.
Okay, you said that earlier. I apologize.
So there will be a outdoor area, likely on the west side of the church.
Understood. Thank you.
Architectural elevations will be provided during the site plan approval process and will be reviewed by planning staff.
One more question for me is the parking increase. I think you said you increased the parking a little bit. What was the standard and what was the increase and what was the net result?
Apologize, I can't read the screen there, but the minimum parking requirement is 1 space per 5 congregate members.
And how many congregate members do you believe you have? Thank you.
Yeah. We are increasing that to approximately 1 space per 3 congregate membership.
The town standard is actually 5 seats in the
It's
congregation.
5 seats, yeah. I apologize.
But there's not a maximum cap on civic uses, so that is acceptable to have more parking than required.
Okay, and there's no consideration for impervious coverage, or is that already taken care of?
Yes, that, of course, that we have to treat for that extra impervious surface area. But that's why you would make a larger pond to account for that extra impervious.
Okay, one final question. Which way is this land flowing? Which way is what's the topo look like?
So where the pond is the lowest area of the property. It's a relatively flat property.
Okay.
But that is the lowest spot. And of course, we do maintain an access easement to the pond, and we also have to maintain a 10-foot access perimeter for any future maintenance activities around the pond.
And when you say there's no utilities in the ETJ, can you just clarify that?
So there's no utilities at this particular site.
Right.
I think the nearest water line was almost a half mile away from the site.
Was there any gravity sewer anywhere?
Oh, no,
Okay.
gravity sewer was not available.
The closest utilities are at the Southern Wake Academy and down in the Briar Gate subdivision, so it's a pretty significant distance in
Okay.
both directions.
All right, thank you.
As an aside, I presented before planning boards and board of commissioners and city council. And the Fuquay planning staff has been second to none. You guys have just a great staff. Their responsiveness is incredible, and their professionalism, and they answer every question that we have had through this process and help us navigate that. So I really appreciate that. I wish you guys would clone yourself and go to some other municipalities.
Give us 10 years.
Do you have any questions?
Right now, I'd like to go ahead and call Joel Tate to testify about the value of adjoining properties. Just to move this along, we're going to do a question and answer, so I'll do a direct examination of him to get this testimony out. Madam Clerk, have we distributed the report yet?
Yep, Mr. Tate, could you
identify yourself?
Yes, thank you.
Joel Tate, 10405 Ligon Mill Road in Wake Forest. I'm a real estate appraiser. I've been in the real estate or appraisal field for 27 years this coming year, or this year. So.
Okay, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Tate, is your curriculum vitae attached to the back page of that letter?
Yes, it is.
Okay, wonderful. What was your assignment for?
I was asked to examine any possible impacts on surrounding residential properties of the proposed religious facility, and set about trying to determine if there was any impact at all, and if so, would that impact be positive or negative?
And what was the nature of your analysis to answer that question?
Okay, I started out, as with most impact analyses, I start out with a literature review, just do a basic overview of available resources, some most well-known, some off the cuff, just to sort of get a broad view of what's out there and what other professionals have written about and studied. And so that's typically my starting point. And after that, I do my own analysis, which in this case, I use some concentric zone modeling, which is most of you may be familiar with, an old urban planning theory that measures spatial relationships from a starting point. In this particular case, I used some religious facilities as a central point and moved out in quarter mile increments to determine if there was any kind of price proximity relationship. And the results of that were overwhelmingly that there was not a significant price decaying effect really in either direction. And in most cases, when there was an effect, it tended to be more positive as you got close to the religious facility as opposed to negative. I also did some paired sales where we looked at as close to identical properties as we could that sold within the same time frame with very similar attributes, and tried to extrapolate, let me back up a step, similar attributes with the exception of proximity to a religious facility, and try to extrapolate if there was a price differential that could be reasonably attributed to the proximity to the religious facility. And in that case, again, the overwhelming result was that we just didn't see a significant difference in price that could be attributed to the religious facility. And then lastly, just as a way to put a bow on it, I just reviewed some case studies in my own internal files. I've analyzed amenities and disamenities in real estate for a long time, and do this kind of thing as part of my practice. And so that was what I was asked to do, what I did.
Mr. Tate, did you reach a conclusion?
I did. I also wanted to add that I did look at the site plan, and I looked at property values within the impact on property values within the context of the proposed site. And my conclusion was that I did not find an adverse impact on surrounding residential properties based on the proposed site plan and the proposed land use.
And in reaching that conclusion, did you consider those properties that are listed on the third page of your report?
I did.
Okay. And those are the adjoining properties to the site of the proposed?
Right. It's all the properties that are physically adjoining, contiguous with the site, and then a couple that, I think 3 maybe, that were directly across or diagonally across the street in 2 directions. So all those that would be immediately impacted by the site, I did consider in my analysis.
And are you confident in your conclusion?
Yes.
Wonderful. And the report that's been distributed is a complete summary of your analysis and conclusions?
Yes.
Wonderful. Are there any questions for Mr. Tate?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Because this is not my area of expertise. So my question is on your, where you got all the properties listed with the parcel ID, the PIN, address, relationship, site, what does GLA stand for?
Gross living area.
Okay.
And that's just based on tax records. I didn't go measure each house. That's just public record.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Any further questions for Mr. Tate? Thank you, Mr. Tate.
Thank you.
That is the conclusion of our evidence on the case. I'll go ahead and just summarize how this evidence applies to the specific findings of fact before the board. In particular, let me go ahead and, if I can find my sheet of paper. There we go. On finding of fact number 1, that the proposed use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan is submitted. You have heard today that the service will be at 10 o'clock. There will be 1 service. There are 360 to 375 adult congregants who attend. That will produce about 133 trips, and that is not at a peak hour. So in terms of peak hour trip generation, it was in the low 20s. So the evidence before you is that this use, the largest attendance will occur on Sunday mornings, and which are low traffic hours. You also have heard evidence concerning the setbacks that are being provided. That is that there will be a minimum 30-foot type A perimeter buffer provided on all property lines adjoining the parcel, except along Spence Farm Road where it will meet the 15-foot type C buffer. There's a request to reduce, though, to meet a performance standard on the west, where there will be a 20-foot evergreen buffer with evergreen plantings. And then along that western property line, there is, we will be moving the road there, but we will meet the 50-foot setback standard. So you also heard testimony concerning the stormwater control measures, that we meet the requirements for the mean height of that and the safety provisions that will be provided with that. There is nothing intrinsic about the use of a religious assembly that will create any special hazards or nuisances here. And you've also heard that we will meet all the requirements of the LDO. There will also be on-site water and sewer provided, even though the town of Fuquay-Varina isn't able to provide those. On finding number 2, that we have met all of the required conditions and specifications. You've heard that the site is 6.87 acres, which exceeds the 3-acre minimum. We will meet the 50-foot minimum setback, and there will be no internally illuminated signage. On the third finding of fact, that the proposed use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property, or that the use is a public necessity. You've heard, again, I won't restate, but those points about the buffers. Additionally, you've heard from an appraiser who has worked in the field for over 30 years, who has testified based on his analysis of both literature of the site and of the adjoining property that there will be no negative impacts on the property values of the adjoining properties. On finding 4, that the location and character of the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted, will be in harmony with the area. Within the report of Mr. Tate, you will read that the literature says that, in fact, religious uses can increase the property values of properties that are within that quarter-mile increment around a site. So that speaks to the harmony of this use. Additionally, there's been testimony from Pastor Brubaker of the community involvement and also the willingness to use a large meeting space that the church provides for things like a polling place and also as shelter in times of need if that is useful. We also, the question was posed that this is a rural agricultural zoning all around this. This church use, as Mr. Tate's report states, churches are low density, they're low intensity, and so that is consistent and in harmony with the property nearby. That's all that I would say on that. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And if you've thought of any questions for the witnesses, they can come back up too.
As it relates to 3 Ponds Drive.
Yes.
Who is benefited by the drive and who drives over that roadway regularly?
Yeah, I'm going to have Jamie come back up, but it's an access drive to the site behind us.
There are some building structures, residential structures behind that property. It's not really visible from the road. I've driven out there and canvassed the area. The road's in very poor condition. By building this church, it's actually going to improve the road because they're going to be shifting the road off their property. So it'll probably be the first maintenance activity on that road in a very long time.
Is there a legal agreement?
Yes, there is a
Boundary line
50-foot
agreement?
access easement that forms the western property line of our parcel. So you got our western property parcel, and then there's 50 feet for that access road.
And so everybody whose property will be burdened by this, where you're moving?
Yeah, so
They've agreed to that move?
we haven't approached the neighbors regarding that move, but it's standard construction practice that you're not allowed to block any access to that road during construction. And generally the way they do that is they maintain the existing road and construct the road improvements next to it, and then they shift traffic over there. That will be part of the construction procedures.
If I can clarify, so there is a 50-foot access easement, private access, adjacent to this property. It appears that that dirt road meandered into their property. So I think what they're going to investigate if they can just relocate it back into the easement where it's supposed to be. They won't be cutting off access.
So it's like over time, the road just kind of shifted or whatever.
Potentially,
Yeah.
Nobody's really paying attention to the lines, but
Right.
there's a full 50-foot access easement that is not on this property at all, that's adjacent to it.
Gotcha.
You can see the dash line going down in the picture there.
Thank you for clarifying.
I have a kind of a question about that, but, well, hopefully, since you haven't approached them, that'll go well. But if it doesn't go well, what's the backup plan? I mean, are you going to revise your site plan?
So if we can't shift that road for whatever reason, the reduced 20-foot buffer, from what I understand from planning staff, would take place at the edge of that road. I think we've had that conversation.
Yeah, I believe there's even a note. I was going to pull it up real quick because I know it's small on this. Yeah, note number 4. Can you read that?
It's more of a dirt.
I'm not I didn't sign up as I'm a real estate lawyer on this, so I will make the point that with a 50-foot easement there, I think that we have more than a sufficient space for them to move out of our property. And certainly we want to have that conversation in a neighborly fashion, but in order to meet the town's requirements, we would need to go ahead and just move their road to within their 50-foot easement. So we're not talking about a tremendous movement there, nor are we closing their road. So we'd ask in a nice way, but I think ultimately we would have to say that the town requires that we provide a buffer here, so we need to straighten your road out.
There's also acknowledgement. Note number 4 on that site plan is, our goal is to have Three Ponds Road moved off the project property. We recognize if we are unable to do so, we will adjust the buffer and parking to ensure the required buffer size. So.
Okay, thank you. And that was my next question was Three Ponds Drive regarding, did you mention that there was the 50-foot setback is in effect from Three Ponds Drive as well, and that's being reduced?
It's a 30-foot.
Oh, you mean
30-foot landscape buffer, but a 50-foot building setback.
So there is a building setback off of that because it's a private drive?
I believe the building setback in the LDO specifies the property boundary setback.
Okay.
So it would be 50 feet from the property boundary in that case. Now, I was referring to the landscape buffer.
Yes.
Where we would have to.
Yeah, I kind of commingled those. So what is the distance from the property line to the back corner of the building? I'm not able to.
It's dimensioned at 54.97 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, because my eyes are failing.
I can make it bigger.
Just one final question for me is what is the impact of keeping the buffer at 30?
We would have to shift our parking. It would reduce our number of desirable parking spaces. We would still be way above the minimum requirement. It's just a church preference to have additional parking.
Has there been an analysis done as to what the impact to the number of parking spaces would be?
So the church's ultimate growth goal for this site would be around 700 congregant members. And if you base that on the maximum capacity, that's basically where we came up with our number, our 200 and whatever, X number of spaces.
Yeah, what I'm asking though is on your site plan here, if you had a 30-foot buffer and you met the minimum requirement without a request for a reduction, how does that impact your site plan? Not generally, but has there been an analysis done as to will the site no longer function?
Oh, no, it will function fine. You see those parking spaces on the west side?
Yes.
We would lose a line of parking spaces on that, but still we'd have more than enough parking to meet the town standards.
And I guess it's worth noting, yes, we would meet the town standards for today. In terms of parking, as I think Pastor Brubaker mentioned, we're making a lot of new congregants, both in young ones, but it's a growing church. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to put ourselves or the town in a situation, or our neighbors in a situation where we don't have adequate parking for the church. So I think that's the balance there, is trying to make sure that we have parking for where we think that this is going to grow, so we're not parking in the neighbor's yard. And the nice thing about the administrative adjustment that the town offers is that even though we're not necessarily providing 30 feet, by being more intense in the landscape material that we use, we can get the same performance that we get with the 30 feet. So the intent is certainly to provide the same degree of screening, just in a narrower format.
Okay, one final question for me. Has there been an attempt to maintain a 30-foot landscape buffer in the design
Yes, initially, we've had several sketches in our design, and we initially had that 30-foot. With discussions with our client, wanting some additional parking or would like to have additional parking, we determined that if we do this administrative amendment, we can add an additional row of parking.
Does the board have any further questions?
I have a question. Coming off of a Spence Farm Road, we're traveling eastbound, is that a right turn lane?
That's correct.
And how long will that be?
I believe it's generally 100 foot with appropriate taper.
It sounds like you're planning growth there at the church pretty quickly to double in size, hopefully. So I would hate for there to be a traffic burden in the future.
Right, so my traffic count was based on the maximum square footage of that building at maximum build out.
All right, with no further questions, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition or in support or in opposition to this petition? Just to confirm, were you sworn in, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
Please state your address and profession.
My name is Jeanette Green. My address is 5421 Spence Farm Road, and I'm retired. The property that is in question is, my house is right beside it, and it borders 3 ponds. I'm right there on the corner.
Just to clarify, that kind of cut out corner in the northwest?
I'm right on the corner of where, you see where 3 Ponds Drive is? Yes. That little spot right there with the 2.
Okay.
That's me. That's my property. So, I was just wondering, are we really gonna go through with this? I've been out there for over 30-something years, and all my life it's just been residential property. So will this be deemed commercial, or will it stay within the residential?
So I think that it's owned residential agricultural now, and so the church is requesting a special use permit to allow for the religious facility to reside on that zoning.
Okay. I don't have anything else to say.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak at this. My name is Gregory Anderson. I'm a mechanical engineer, but more importantly, I'm a resident of 1549 Old Mackenzie Drive in Holly Springs. This is the closest house that's in a subdivision to the property that's in question. I've lived there for a little over 15 years. One of the big concerns that I have I don't think is being addressed completely is that Spence Farm is a residential 2-lane road. It has a stop sign at each end. The closest thing to what they're planning on putting in is in the area is the Southern Wake Academy. We've seen plenty of traffic problems in that facility over the 15 years. It has gotten better over past several years, but with carpool and everything, it does get backed up significantly. I think with the Sunday services, they are still comparing that with peak traffic of a weekday and saying that they're outside of peak traffic. But on a Sunday, most people are traveling to churches. Therefore, the peak time is going to be closer to when the churches are actually meeting. I also know that churches love to grow. I think eventually it will be a 2-service event, probably not in the near future, not in the first 5 years, but long term, I expect that would be a direction that would be the easiest way to grow instead of trying to expand the church. With that being said, I think that the traffic studies need to also include each end of Spence Farm, both at Old Powell and at Piney Grove, with both of those being areas that would get congested as people try to make especially left turns onto those roads. There is no stop sign on the other directions. There's no light on Piney Grove to direct traffic in that area. So during those peak times, we would see significant backup in those areas. So I do have concerns about, also the entrance of the drive being at the top of the hill with, as far as viewability of the residences near there and how far they're able to see up the hill if anyone is coming out faster than they should.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carol Sampson, formerly Carol Spence, born Carol Spence. The property that is proposed is directly across the street from the place where I grew up. My family is on to the left and the right as you face the property. And my concern and my request for consideration is that my mother, for instance, who lives at 5400 Spence Farm Road, had not received communication about the proposed building. I have absolutely no trepidation about what the church is designed to do or what the purpose of the church is. I just wonder about the conversations, the analysis that was done through research outside of conversations with the neighbors. I just want to bring that into consideration as I am also a minister, a chaplain, and a businesswoman. Jeanette Green is a relative, and I just, and I also received, I have communication with one of the neighbors that's diagonal and to the left if we're facing the property, and to the right if you're standing on the property, Juan Flores, who purchased a property that was formerly Spence Farm property. He received a letter that was dated for June 3rd, and in conversation, he brought it to my attention. My concern was that my mother has lived there for her life to the left of him, and she did not receive a letter as well. So I just bringing it to, I want to bring it to the attention of us all that in community, there should have been conversations prior. I just want to bring that forward because in listening to Mr. Tate, I was questioning whether a conversation should have been had at some point. I don't know how what my reflections will mean to going forward, but I could not sit by and not at least have that considered as we move forward in this process. So we're going, if it is true, and I own property at 5117 Commission Drive, right back of Spence Farm Road. I recently had a demolition done there to prepare to move back to the area. I'm currently a resident of Fuquay-Varina. And I wanted to speak on this after I received, I happened to be in conversation when another neighbor reported that they received the letter. And I just would like to, if there's a possibility for that to be addressed, I would like to entertain why some of the closer neighbors did not receive a letter when the gentleman at Mackenzie Road received 2 letters. He and his wife separately received letters. Also, we have in our presence Judge Damian McCullers, and he lives pretty much directly across from the property as well. And from my understanding, in a conversation with him, he did not receive a letter. I'd just like to see if we can entertain how that oversight.
So staff can definitely share with you that the neighbor list is a 200-foot radius that's drawn around the property that's determined. That's what legally we're responsible for notifying. So we can definitely share that list with you and show you who received notification.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Spence, just for the record, please, can you provide your address and profession?
I did. I am a minister.
Yep.
I'm an associate minister at Basil Creek Missionary Baptist Church. I also have an LLC, CDS Global Soul Care Solutions, LLC. And I'm a businesswoman, independent contractor.
Okay. I don't know how important it is for her to state her address. I don't think I heard it.
104 Hillcrest Circle, Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Spence.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, to all that are assembled here today. My name is Damian McCullers. I live at 5420 Spence Farm Road, Holly Springs, 27540. Before we begin, let me also state that I do work for the state of North Carolina. Specifically, I work for the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts. I am not here in any official capacity. I'm here as a resident of Holly Springs. I am here as a resident of 5420 Spence Farm Road, Holly Springs, North Carolina. Let me begin by saying that I have had zero conversation. I have had zero communication. I have had zero conversation with anyone as it relates to this project. I would also indicate to you that just by definition, dictation does not mean conversation. It simply doesn't, by definition. I've been a resident of that space for 13 years. I've received zero communication. Further, I would tell you that it is important that as much as that you do hear, it is just as important as what you don't hear. In all respect and deference to Mr. Guerrero, what you did not hear was anything about a traffic study. What you heard was about a traffic count. And that's simple math. That's based on projections. That's based on anticipation. That is not a study. It simply isn't. Those are facts. I would also tell you, and I would invite you to look at findings of fact number 1 and number 4. And as they've been discussed, and you've heard that there is anticipated growth for the church. That is a lofty goal. I admire it. I think that that is applaudable. If we base it on the numbers that we heard tonight, the numbers went from a family or 5 families of 5, which by my math is 25 people, to 350. That is a 1,300% increase. I would anticipate that there will be an increase moving forward. I believe, just again, based on what's been stated to you here tonight, the goal is 750, which essentially doubles the traffic. I would also tell you that this is a matter of first impression. There is no church on Spence Farm Road. There is no church on that stretch. There is no commercial facility of any type on that road. So while there are projections and while there is anticipation and all of those things, it is speculation. It is speculative because there is no such entity on Spence Farm Road. It's simply not there. I was not privy to the community conversation that was had. I do not know why, but I simply wasn't. I would also indicate to you that based upon what I've seen, there will have to be turn lanes that will need to be inserted. I'm not sure if they will go on the church's property or if they will need to be in both directions. I am not directly across, but I am diagonally across from the project. And that is one of the concerns. As you look at number 1 and we talk about that, I would also invite you to look at number 4 as it relates to the findings of fact. And I would indicate to you that, as I've said, the harmony of the project within the neighborhood simply cannot be. It is not harmonious. It cannot be. It is an anomaly. It is not what is there. It is residential and agricultural. So it simply cannot be by definition. I am not here in opposition of the church, and I want to be clear about that. I am here urging this body to get more research. I'm here urging this body to get more information. I'm here urging this body to allow for the church to do what it said it was going to do and have a conversation with the community. You've heard from a number of people who said we were not a part of that conversation. We have not been a part of that conversation. There was a statement that was made, and I'm sure it was done. In good faith. And that statement was that person was thankful for helping get this done. That presupposes that this is a done deal. That presupposes that the decision has been already made. And the last thing that I will say is, as I started, dictation is not conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. May I recall a witness? Mr. Guerrero? Can you just clarify for the board the threshold for traffic impact analysis?
Yes, sir. So the LDO is pretty specific about when a traffic study analysis is required, and it points to the peak hour traffic. I don't remember. I'll have to refer to planning staff if that's 100 or 150 trips per day.
So it's 100 peak hour trips or 1,000 average daily trips trigger a traffic impact analysis, and that is at site plan, not at SUP. So when they submit site plan, they will either have to submit a traffic impact analysis if that is triggered by those numbers, or a trip generation letter, which basically justifies why they don't trigger a TIA.
Correct. So what the numbers I presented to you was a initial trip generation using the Institute of Transportation Engineers numbers, 10th manual to be specific, which basically they analyze that particular use, and they collect data from all over the nation and determine, based on that data, what the anticipated traffic count generation is going to be in trips. And as I'll reiterate, it was during weekday, the entire weekday, the max, it was 328 trips, but out of that entire day, it was, I believe, 28 peak hour trips increase, which is, both of those numbers are well below the threshold required in the LDO.
And is the peak trips, you said weekdays, is there any accounting for weekends?
Right. The way you define peak hour, you don't look at the individual use, you do actual traffic count for that entire road. And in general, and without doing a full traffic study, but in general, in this area, peak hour is during what we would call rush hour. So it's going to fall somewhere in between 7 and 9 in the morning, and somewhere in between 4 and 6 in the evening during the weekday. Weekend is always outside the peak hour traffic.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I mean, how do I ask this? What you just said, that statement you just made, that peak hours are, because that's very important, peak hours are based on, not on the weekends.
Right.
Where is that your opinion, or is
No,
that
it's just how ITRI defines peak hours, and you got to understand. If you look at it at a microcosm level with just this church, of course, the church's peak hour traffic is going to be on Sundays.
Right. I understand what you're saying. I was just wondering if you had that based on a study or a fact.
Right.
Or...
But what we're looking at in the macro, everybody that's going to be traveling up and down that road. Yeah. And those hours correspond to what we consider, what everybody's used to is rush hour traffic. People leaving their house, going to their work, and then coming and returning home. Churches in general, specific conditions, you may require a traffic study, but we weren't even close to that LDO threshold that would require a traffic analysis.
Absolutely.
Member Braxton, I think maybe one of the questions, just to get to that, is there a specific methodology and analysis that one takes to determine whether to do a traffic impact analysis, and also how one looks at traffic generation?
So one of the gentlemen that just spoke said, it is analytical. It is a formula that we use, and it's not generated by me as an individual. It's generated by ITRE, Institute of Traffic Engineers, which is a national organization. And in their 10th, they have different editions. They're up to the 10th edition right now. It gives you the formula to calculate traffic generation, weekday traffic generation, and peak hour traffic generation based on particular use categories. Churches happens to be in a specific use that is in that list. So we didn't even really have to figure out how we're going to fit that use into the formula. It's specifically, the numbers I threw out were specifically for churches.
And do you have specific training and education that equipped you to do this analysis?
So, as part of the civil engineer and become a professional engineer, and in my case, you got standards, you got different classifications of engineers. They're all engineers, PEs. In my case, it was my specialty was transportation and environmental or water, what is it called? Water quality or water science. Anyway, it was environmental and the transportation side is what I've learned.
And did you rely on that specific training and qualifications to analyze the transportation impacts of this project and the impact it might have in the general area?
Yes, I use the general standard that is used for all traffic studies, and that it goes back to the ITRE manual. In this case, it's the 10th edition manual that calculates how you generate the preliminary traffic counts.
And your expert opinion about traffic was based on anticipated growth, not the current numbers.
That's correct. It was that it's based on. So it's based in particular for the church use. It's based on the square footage of the building itself. Now we showed a 36,000 square foot building footprint. Of course, it's not going to be that, but that was the allowed building footprint that we show. And so I use that maximum 36,000 as my basis for the figure of the traffic generation.
Thank you.
anybody else that would like to speak in support or opposition to this proposal? At this time, we're going to close the public hearing, and the board will go into discussion. The board have any discussion on this petition?
I would like to see a boundary line agreement by the folks who were using Three Ponds Drive about moving the road and those kinds of things. We could approve the plan as is proposed, but that could, I don't know the topography out there, I don't know those things. So, you know, I don't know how easy it's really going to be to move that road and what the effect will be on the folks who use the road. So I would like to see some sort of resolution about that before we approve the plan.
Okay. Anybody else? I think we're not really approving the plan, but approving the use. So, you know, I'm with you on Three Ponds Drive because I know once something's been used for a long time, it's kind of thought to be
dangerous.
That's it, right? It's been so. That's why I was asking those questions about if it doesn't get moved, what's Plan B?
I used the word plan, but I meant the word, the use of the property, which is well-intentioned to, to hurt the.
I'm sorry, can you speak up so I can hear you on this?
Sorry.
Because I have to take the minutes, so
Sure.
it would help.
I don't see where the road situation, I understand exactly what you're saying. I had a very similar situation in a piece of land that we own, our farm in Cumberland County. And with the easement, we were able to work it out, but I know what you're saying. That it would be nice if that was already worked out.
Right.
But it doesn't affect my decision on whether or not it should be granted for a special use permit. I know what you're saying, because that's we got big hearts.
Right.
I mean, I feel bad. I live on Whitted Road in Fuquay-Varina, and there's a stop sign at both ends, and it's horrible. It's horrible, but that's the condition and the nature of where we live, and it's unfortunate, and it breaks my heart to sit here and hear y'all's bleeding hearts. It really does. It's tough, but I don't know. It's just hard.
I'd like to ask the town, what's the this plan here? There's a note number 4 that talks about if there's a challenge. What is the the board can approve the petition, but that doesn't necessarily approve this plan sheet, or does it? It does?
No, it does not.
Okay.
So they will still need to meet all site plan requirements. So number 4, I think, addresses your concern. It tells you that it's their goal to move this road back into the easement, but they acknowledge if they are unable to do so, they will adjust the buffer and parking to ensure the required buffer size. So they kind of have, that's their backup plan, that if for any reason when they get into it and they are unable to move that back into the buffer, that they'll have to work around it.
So is that something that we can make a condition of, since this plan is not binding with our decision? Or is that something that the town has responsibility to ensure that that note carries through the site plan process?
The board can apply a condition. It would have to be consented to by the petitioner, but we can basically include that number 4 as a condition that if the road can't be moved, that the buffer will be measured off of the final placement of the road. That way it may shift inbound if the road can't be moved, and the hope is the road's moved out. They're good with that. They'll just have to get on the record, consent to that.
I think that sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Right. If not, the board will go into the finding of facts. And the first finding of fact is that the proposed use or development will or will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted. Do I have a motion for finding of fact number 1?
Yeah, I'll move. The proposed use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted, because adequate enhancements are planned to Spence Farm Road, adequate parking is planned, and substantial screening around the property is planned.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion for finding of fact number 1 is approved. Finding of fact number 2, the proposed use meets or does not meet all required conditions and specifications because, I guess I should ask if we have any discussion on finding of fact number 2, and if not, do we have a motion? I'd make a motion that finding of fact number 2, the proposed use meets all required conditions and specifications because it is subject to municipal ordinance review through the site plan process to ensure conformity. A second, all in favor say aye.
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 And finding of fact number 2 is approved. Finding of fact number 3, the proposed use will or will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property or the use is a public necessity. Any discussion or a motion on finding of fact number 3?
I'll make a motion that the proposed use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property or the use of its public necessity, because it's not been proven with studies that churches will harm or hinder the value of properties or a place of worship will do that. And they have also, in their site plans, have met all the requirements of the LDO with all the landscape materials that will be provided and all the 50-foot wide easement. And I guess if we were going to have an amendment, this would be where to do it, though, wouldn't it? Jane? Okay, all right. So my motion is that it will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property or the use of the public necessity.
Second.
We have a second, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion for finding of fact number 3 is approved. And finding of fact number 4, the location and character of the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted, will or will not be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development of the town of Fuquay-Varina and its ordinances, because. Does the board have any discussion on finding of fact number 4 or a motion?
Discussion. The fact that there's not another church on Spence Farm Road, does that mean that that's not within harmony?
Are you saying, are you asking?
I'm asking. I mean, how do we define, how, Mr. Chairman, how would you define harmony?
I think
a block, is it a mile, is it a half a mile? What does that mean?
Well, I guess my my understanding, or the way I would think that if it's in harmony with the area, whatever area that is that it's kind of not disruptive.
Right.
It fits into the community area, and it, it just kind of fits in there.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion for finding number 4, if I can.
Please do.
The location and character of the property of the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located in a general conformity with the plan of the development of the town of Fuquay-Varina and its ordinances. That it's not going to have, it will comply with all the sound ordinances, the lighting ordinances, the lack of internally illuminated signage. It's got the 50 feet setbacks. It meets all the setback standards. And it's, like I say, met all the requirements of the LDO.
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And motion for finding of fact number 4 is approved.
You need a motion?
Yes, the petitioner has been advised that the burden of proof and evidence upon submitting such application is the responsibility of the petitioner. Such proof and evidence presented must demonstrate that the required findings of fact have been met. At this time, do I have a motion for the petition?
Yes. I'll make a motion to approve BOA-SUP-2024-02 as presented, because all of the findings of fact were approved by this board.
If the board wants to add a condition to that approval regarding the setback with the landscape buffer on the western portion, I think the condition would be that if the Three Ponds Drive is unable to be moved, that the 20 feet will be measured off of wherever the final eastern boundary of that road would be. It would shift inward. That would be our condition.
Wouldn't that be up to the town to do that?
We're making that a condition as part of our approval, because that covers the concern on the road.
Discuss and make that addition?
You can adopt that as part of your motion if you want to, what I just said. Keep moving it again.
I guess if we want to add it, we can. I think we were kind of at that point a minute ago, but you may not be comfortable adding it.
Okay. Pardon?
It's your motion. If
Yeah.
you'd like to adopt his proposal.
I've already read it on the record, so you can just adopt what we said on the shifting of that 20-foot buffer.
I still can't hear you.
So he said he's already read the condition on the record, and so if you want to adopt his wording of that, you can amend your motion.
Then let's add his condition to the record, please.
Y'all want to consent on the record?
We had a thumbs up.
The applicant agrees to that condition.
Very good. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
All right.
Pick one.
Okay. Let's see. I think all in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion for BOA Special Use Permit 2024-02 passes tonight. All right. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to ask staff if there will be an August meeting. As there is no other business to discuss, I'll accept a motion to adjourn the July 9th, 2024 Board of Adjustment meeting.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is